If the Next Generation cast is like my nuclear family, then my next guests are like my aunts, uncles, and cousins who lived right across the street. I am, of course, talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It is my incredible pleasure to welcome the series cast: Alexander Siddig, Terry Farrell, Armin Shimerman, Nana Visitor, and Cirroc Lofton, as well as executive producer Ira Steven Behr. My extended family and Star Trek colleagues, welcome and thank you for spending some time with me today.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
Ira, I want to start at the very, very beginning. Would you talk a little bit about the origin story for Deep Space Nine?
Well, obviously, the people to talk to would be Mike Pillar and Rick Berman, since they were the little brains that thought it all up. But what I can tell you is what Mike told me back in the day. The original series was Wagon Train in Space, and they were talking about Gunsmoke in space. Now everyone has to go and look up on their computers what the hell Gunsmoke was, because no one remembers Gunsmoke anymore. But the idea of, being in a town, and not being on the move. So basically it was the space station. And, it sounds like a small thing, but it changed the entire dynamic of what could be done with the franchise. So it was pretty brilliant. And the second thing that they did was they made their lead character a single father, also never done before in the franchise. And that really set the stage for what came after.
Deep Space Nine is finding new fans every day because of video and streaming services. I am running into people all the time who are brand new to Next Generation, who were not even born when Next Generation was in production. I would love to hear from you all something memorable. Have you encountered someone who has recently discovered Deep Space Nine and is experiencing it for the first time? And what that sort of means so many years after you wrapped the show. Armin, you're closest to me on the screen, so I want to start with you.
All right. I actually will pass the ball along. I'm going to talk to Nana for a second. Nana, I told you so.
You told me so. I could go back to that moment you told me so. You were absolutely right. Yep, they discovered us 25 years later.
Nana and I were, I think it was the second or third or fourth episode. I'm not quite sure when it was. Perhaps Nana remembers better than I. But we were sitting backstage, and we were aware that your show, TNG, was overshadowing us a great deal, even though we had just started appearing. And Nana very nicely said, "Do you think we'll ever be as popular," or something to that effect. "Do you ever think we'll be as popular as them?" I said, "Just you wait. In time, they will recognize the amount of good work that's being done on our show. They'll find us eventually." And so what you just said, Will, is a reaffirmation of what we talked about 27 years ago.
Yeah, I think about that all the time. And I had the inkling. It was weird. I was at a convention, and it was like a dribble drabble. And all of a sudden, there wasn't a dribble drabble. There was a lot. And then it was just when it went on Netflix, this 15-year-old boy, 15, came up and said, "Oh my God, I love Major Kira." And I was like, what? I didn't know it was on Netflix. That was my first indication. And that was a wave that just kept growing. It was really interesting.
Terry?
There are lots of, sorry to butt in, I should have done that, but because I'm always interrupting Terry, she'll tell you.
You should have raised your hand, Sid.
She didn't even start talking and I interrupted her.
That's advanced interrupting, sir.
It's a pre-interruption.
Yes.
It's quite advanced. But I meet a lot of people every week who say who couldn't possibly have been born during the 90s, who have found Deep Space Nine, and I find that there are different pockets of people. So, for example, the people who gravitate towards my kind of area are generally people who have really found solace in Deep Space Nine as an empathetic show, a show that really cared about the little guy. And there's all sorts of interesting tangents in that for various communities, whether that's the gay community, the trans community. That a lot of people find a lot of comfort in that, and they start very, very young because they've got not much else to look at. And so going back to a show that's clearly spawned other iterations of those sort of shows, but that was the one of the daddies, Terry.
I think for me, what I noticed the difference in this new incarnation of Deep Space Nine's exposure, people's exposure to it, is that people did come up to me and say, "You were my first crush. You made me feel like I was normal. You made me feel like, you get me, love is love. It doesn't matter." To me, the idea of just loving someone, no matter how they come, what the package is, what a freaking gift you gave me, Ira, to get to play a character that really helps the underdog feel seen. And I feel like Spock was my favorite character growing up because I felt out of place growing up. So he was out of place. And so I was like Spock. And then getting to be on Star Trek was like, oh my God, I get to try to make other people who feel like, Land of the Misfit Toys feel like, yeah, no, you're good. You belong somewhere. And we're a really cool place to belong. And that's just like, wow, we get to live in that. When we die, it's still going to be here. We will still be there for people. And that is just what an amazing gift to have in your life, to be a part of something as big as Star Trek.
One of the stories that you all told that I think is extraordinarily relevant right now is Far Beyond the Stars, where Avery is thrown back to the 1950s and is living as a pulp fiction writer.
You want me to print it? Make the captain white. That's not what I wrote.
Ira, would you talk a little bit about the creative process of bringing that from inception to screen, and if you feel that it is relevant today?
Obviously it's talking about things that are happening in the news. There's no getting around that. Originally it was season 6, so we were feeling our oats. We were feeling good about the show. And we had been pitched an idea about Jake. It was a show about Jake, who was time traveling into the past, where he was a writer in the pulp sci-fi world. And it turned out it was these aliens, a typical Star Trek scenario where these aliens wanted to see how humans interacted. And I didn't like it. And I said, we're not going to do it. Then one day I remember driving home from work, and suddenly it just kind of laid out to me that the idea of, if it was Benjamin Sisko is a black man writing about a black captain, and what would that have been like in 1953 or 54? And then Avery, it was Steve Oster, the supervising producer, said we have to have Avery. We have to move the schedule around so that Avery can direct it. He's going to want to, and he's going to have the passion for it. And that was the most intense and wonderful time I ever spent, those weeks when we did that show. I mean, Avery calling my house every night before I even got home from the office. He was talking to my wife. My wife would be picking up, Avery, he's not home yet. You got to wait. It's like, it was a great experience watching that show.
A lot of the things that he was talking about in the episode are little clues to people about how they can inform themselves about the period and educate themselves about Black history. He mentioned some writers in that episode, from Ralph Ellison and Zora Neale Hurston, and those kinds of things, W.E.B. Du Bois, so Richard Wright, and I would add to that James Baldwin and Carter G. Woodson. But these are the kinds of material that I was starting to read later on in school. So this was an entryway for me to get to know more about culture, our culture, his directing preparation, what he did on the show to electrify us, the kind of passion that he had for the material really translated to the work. And all of us really, I mean, I rewatched the episode, and everybody here, all my colleagues, did a fantastic job of stepping outside of their traditional characters and being unlike their characters that they normally play. So I think it was a tribute to all of us finding the importance of telling this particular story. And so we all brought our little bit of A game to make sure that it hit a home run as well as it did.
Nana, Major Kira is such a powerful character, and she is the lens through which we view Bajoran society.
I have been fighting for Bajoran independence since I was old enough to pick up a phaser. We finally drive the Cardassians out, and what do our new leaders do? They call up the Federation and invite them right in.
She is such a complex character. Would you talk a bit about the discovery process of seeing just how deep she really goes?
Yeah, in retrospect, certainly I wouldn't have known the words to use. Shell-shocked is what we used in those days. But certainly she had post-traumatic stress. I mean, that's like a textbook case of it. And her distrust of everyone totally came from that. Walking around on Paramount while we were shooting the pilot helped, because I had these weird ridges, except it was pretty subtle. So I'd get double, triple looks by other people on Paramount who weren't aware of the show yet.
I got those looks too.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was not quite as subtle.
People thought my marks were actually tattoos.
So you guys know, the minute people look at you and go, what are you? What's wrong with you? What's up with you? What is that? You are othered, and you feel you feel yourself shutting down as if it's not okay, whatever you are, or you get defensive, or you get aggressive. Major Kira definitely was aggressive, especially in the first part of her arc.
Armin, we've been talking a little bit about Nana feeling othered, and you and I spoke before we started our official sort of session today about Ferengi, and you shared an insight that has been sitting just outside of my peripheral vision since Next Generation, which is, for a lot of cultures, for a lot of people, the Ferengi represent a culture or a people who have been othered. And you mentioned to me, around the world, the othered culture is different, but the impulse, the emotion is still the same. Were you aware of that when you were Quark?
Yes. So just to put some flesh on the bones of what Wil just said, as conventions took me around the world, other cultures have referred to the Ferengi as Nana was just saying, the other. The people that are looked down upon because they're part of the minority. They have a different culture. They have a different way of looking at things. One of the great things that I feel very proud of is to have represented the other. And one of, yes, the perhaps from a human point of view, from that the Ferengi's morality was a little different than the humans. But at the same time, Ira and the writers were good enough to, at times, give me what I'm sure Terry would call a Spock speech, where I saw things from our outside point of view and were able to tell the humans how different and how not necessarily perfect they were either. So, but it is important to depict that. And bravo to the powers that be, whether it was Michael and Rick or the writer's room, that they gave us that. And it is a great tribute to the originators of the program that they allowed an other to be part of the main group.
Cirroc, I deeply enjoy the relationship between Jake and Nog. It reminds me of what I never had on Next Generation, which was a best friend, a confidant, a person who was my own age. Aaron Eisenberg was a friend of mine. We worked together in a movie before he was cast on Deep Space Nine, and I adored him. I would love for you to talk a bit about the relationship between Jake and Nog, and I'm curious to know if it was meaningful to you to have that connection of someone a little closer to your age when you were, like me, the kid around all the adults.
Aaron Eisenberg, the late, great Aaron Eisenberg, was a remarkable person. He had a big heart, and he was a fine actor. And he was one of my good friends on the show, and actually felt a real kinship with him because of the age similarity. What I think he represents for me is the kind of dream that Dr. King was speaking about in his speech, which is the unity of children and the unity of races and the embracing of differences. And I think that's one of the important things that we represented in this show, was the two different cultures getting together, finding common ground, accepting each other for who we were, and building a friendship. And that friendship lasted throughout the time of us filming the show, all the way until he passed away last year. And, you know, that friendship is what endures. And, you know, his legacy will always be remembered in the work that we did and the work that we continue to do on the podcast that he and I started together, The Seventh Rule. So I'm really happy that I got a chance to get to know Aaron as a person and get to work alongside him as an actor. It was a real blessing.
We did not just lose Aaron Eisenberg last year. We lost Renee Bergenwa as well. Renee was such an important part of Deep Space Nine. Maybe we could end today. Ira, I would love to start. If maybe you all just had a few words to memorialize and remember these two great men who we lost in the last year.
You know, Renee, he was a force. He was, he had strong opinions, and he backed those opinions up. He was very talented. He could be prickly as hell. He could be sweet as hell. As an actor, you know, he was a joy to watch. And he also gave me his face at the end of season 6. I was walking down to the set. He was coming back, and he ripped off his mask. The last time for a couple of months, soaking wet. And he goes, "Here, a souvenir." And I said, "I'm keeping this damn thing. I'm going to keep it. And it's up there on my, in my library to this day." So that's what I think of when I think of Renee. Aaron, I just wish I could have told him. I mean, I just thought he knew, which was my mistake. I just thought the actors knew how much we loved them because we kept trying to give them great things to do all the time. So that's how writers say that they love actors, is they try to give them the best material that they can. I just thought he was a funny guy. He was a sweet guy. Later on in the conventions, you know, I got to spend time with him, more time with him. You know, he was, you know, I know it's a cliche, but in some ways, Aaron was too good for this planet that we live on, you know, which is why I think he was taken so young. He was just a good, decent human being. And we miss him. It's easy to miss him.
Aaron was everybody's best friend. I mean, he was, whenever I went to a convention in some part of the world where it was usually Star Trek actors or some other from other shows that I don't really know, there's no offense to them, and I wouldn't want to, I want to have someone to have lunch with, I would find Aaron, and Aaron would be there. And he actively tried to offend you, you know, but as a joke. As a thing that he found that funny, and I found it funny. It's a particularly British sense of humor. He's like, you know, you make fun, send someone up, as they used to say in the UK. And I don't think there'll be ever enough said about Aaron. He's a sweet human being. Was a sweet human being. And Renee, I didn't know very well on the show. I didn't do very many scenes with him. He was prickly. He could be prickly. But he would also laugh and fill a room with his laughter. And I will yield the rest of my time to Nana, because I know that he and Nana were very close.
The loss of Renee is huge. he was a deep friend. And he was difficult. He was all those things. But he was one of the things I respect most that an actor can be. He was interested in the work, constantly fascinated, and brought a child's mind to every aspect of it. He cared so deeply, and he would get into his flow state, and it was beautiful to work with him and to watch him work. Aaron was this enormous, huge heart. He and I texted all the time. The last time we talked was 2 days before he died. When I was told that, my husband came in and said, "I'm so sorry to tell you, Aaron died." And I went into denial like I've never gone. And it was about an hour before I would let the information in that he was gone. And of course, I knew for 2 years that Renee was ill. And that was its own journey. But I got to take some of that journey with him, of helping him die, helping him talk about it. And it was a very precious thing to me. So it's huge. I miss them. I miss them both.
Terry?
Oh gosh, yeah. Both of those relationships had initial struggles. With Renee, he ended up being like a father figure to me, and I really cherish the journey I went on with him, because at first I used to make him so angry. I would be like, "Oh my God," and it's amazing how it evolved, and it's just a testament to what a big person he was too, and it's just amazing. And Aaron, at first he just drove me nuts, how he just wouldn't stop, like a little shush. But he would force the conversation to be like, "Oh, Terry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset you, or I didn't mean to piss you off, or I didn't mean to say it like that." And then we developed a really nice rapport and banter with each other. It was just, the more confident he got that you liked him, the more relaxed he was about everything. And so, I don't know, he's just amazing soul.
For Aaron, to the spirit of Aaron that is probably here somewhere around us, Aaron, you must know by now that we all loved you. And because he was always concerned about his acting, please know, Aaron, we respected you. You were one of the finest actors I ever worked with. For Renee, as Sid said, he was a consummate actor. And because my whole world is about acting, that's all I ever really think about. I will say that I was always in awe of working with Renee. And if I have the last word, let me leave it with Shakespeare. They were men taken for all in all. I shall not look upon their likes again.
Let's leave it there. Thank you all so much. It has been an honor and an incredible privilege to spend this time with you today. Thank you all so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wil.
Thank you, Wil.
Thank you, Wil.
Love you, Wil.
And to everyone at home, a reminder that you can revisit all of these wonderful people on Deep Space Nine on CBS All Access, which has every single episode available to stream. And if you're just tuning in, oh boy, this whole Star Trek Day event is happening in support of our Star Trek United campaign. For every person who tweets the hashtag Star Trek United Gives, CBS All Access will donate $1 to organizations who do the real world work of championing equality, social justice, the pursuit of scientific advancements, and realizing the dream of Star Trek. Everyone, from the bottom of my heart, thank you again for taking the time to meet with me today. I hope you all have a wonderful Star Trek Day.